Okay. Masechet Eruvin, page 55. We finished lots of Agadah about remembering our learning. And so let's go right back into the topic, which is creating a boundary around the city. Right? A city includes an extra 2,000 amot around the city. We learned from the cities of the Leviim, which also had that extra 2,000 amot, which means that when it says al yaseish mimekomo, not leaving your place, it means you cannot leave your city plus 2,000 amot. But the question is, which is going to become very complicated, how exactly do we measure this? Because we have to assume it's a rectangle. And so any shape that we have to turn it first into a rectangle, like this. And then beyond that, we have another 2,000 amot. So in a case like this, if you're here, actually you can go much more, 2,000 plus whatever this is. So making rectangles out of lots of different shapes, that is going to be our topic today. We have a baraita here, Tosefta, which expands on the Mishnah. Tanu Rabbanan, kesad me'aberin et ha'arim. We explained the word me'aberin is like uba, like a pregnant woman. You added some space. So to a city, we add some padding around it in order to make it a rectangle. Aruka kemochehi. If it's long like a rectangle, then we leave it just as it is, and you add 2,000 amot all around. Agula osin la zaviyot. If it's a round city, then you add corners, and so you square it off. Merubaot en osin la zaviyot. If it is square, then you don't add anything. We'll see why is it supposed to have to say that? The Gemara will discuss. If it's longer on one side and shorter on the other side, then you take the longest side and you just draw a straight line, and so you turn it into a perfect square. The Tosefta continues. Haya bait echad yoseh kemin pigum. או שני בתים יוצאים כמין שני פיגומים, רינותן כאילו חוט מתוח עליהן ומודד ממנו ולהלן 2,000 אמה. So if you have turrets protruding, this was like we had, kind of like this, where you have this protruding, or a better picture. Here, like this, right? If you have different things that are in different, sticking out, some more, some less, you take the one that's at the most out and you make a line from there. And after that, you have 2,000 amot. If you had a city that's the shape of a rainbow, or of the Greek letter gamma. Gamma looks gamma llooks like an L upside down. So that idea would be something. Here's a case of a rainbow city. So you would fill it in, and then you have 2,000 amot beyond the filled in area. That's that case. These are the other cases we already saw, and this is the case of gamma. So here again, you would fill it in first, and then beyond that 2,000 amot. Which means if this is 1,000 amot, the guy who's here can walk 1,000 and then another 2,000. Okay, that's the end of the Tosefta. Good. So the Tosefta gave lots of different cases. We're going to ask why some of these seem obvious. Right? Why did it need to teach us that? If it's long, so it's rectangle, then you leave it. Of course you leave it. Well, if it's long and narrow, we might have thought that you're supposed to square it off like this, right? You might have thought maybe push this out and push this out until it's square. No, so this teaches that even if it's long and narrow, you leave the rectangle and that's all you have. Okay, we needed to know that. If it's square, then you don't add corners. Well, obviously, it's a square already. It has corners. What is it? What's the question? Pishita, let's say it's square, but it's not lined up with north, south, east, west of the whole world. So you might have thought that if it's shaped like this. So then you fill it out until it makes a square that is aligned with the north-south axis. Therefore, the Tosefta teaches that you don't do that. If it's square and it's crooked, that's okay. In other words, diamond, you leave it just as is, and you have only 2,000 amot from the actual walls. You don't fill anything in. Good. היה בית אחד יוצא כמין פיגום, או שני בתים יוצאים כמין שני פיגומים. If you have houses that were sticking out, I think I forgot to read this in Tosefta. Okay, so we're reading it here. So one or two houses that are sticking out, then you have to fill it in. It doesn't say here, but it have to be within 70 2/3 amot from the edge of the city. Then you do still fill them in, kind of like in this picture, right? If you have this house sticking out, or even a house sticking out here, as long as it's within 70 2/3, so then that's the outermost edge of the city, and you make that line, and then you have 2,000 amot beyond that. So now to Sifta, if you have one or two, why do you have to tell me one or two? What's the difference? I mean, you go to the outermost one. If you know what, even one, you would move it out. Of course, if there's two near each other on one side, then you would move it out that way. Why say two? Teaches you that if there's one house sticking out on the east and one house sticking out on the west, that we extend it both ways. I might have thought I can only extend one way, so it teaches that we actually do extend it both ways. Okay, good. Okay, so the rainbow shape or the gamma shape, we fill it in. אמר רב הונא, עיר עשויה כקשת, אם יש בין שני ראשיה פחות מ4,000 אמה, מודדין לה מן היתר, ואם לאו, מודדין לה מן הקשת. Rav Huna is now limiting the case of the Tosefta, and he says if you have a rainbow shape, but it's very wide, let's say from this point to this point is more than 4,000 amma. He says in that case you can't fill it in totally. You cannot fill in the whole thing, but rather you would, let's say at this point is 2,000 amma. Okay, so that's fine. You can fill that in, and then you'd have to start measuring from here the 2,000 ammas, which means that this guy can only walk 2,000 amot in all directions. He would not be able, no one would be able to walk from here straight all the way here. Although obviously he could walk within the city and walk around it, but not within this area. Okay, this shape, this doesn't look so good because it probably would be within 2,000 amot of this spot. So that's questionable. Okay, let's assume it's not. And so that's his limitation, that this space here has to be less than 4,000 amot wide altogether.
Rabbi,
yes.
In that case, we're saying that the person can't walk a straight line from like through that empty space. Only way he would be able to get to the other side of the city is by going through it.
I'm sorry, what he's saying is that you would not measure the extra 2,000 amot from here. If it's less than, do I have a less than? If it's less than, then this is all considered filled in, and then you have 2,000 amot further this way. That's the point. That's his point, right? If it's small than 4,000, you can fill it all in. This is all like a rectangle city. You make a rectangle this way, right? You make a rectangle all around. Well, they didn't talk about this section, but I don't know. So you make a rectangle out of it, and then you would have 2,000 amot. This whole area you could walk in, right? But if it's more than 4,000 amot, then you don't do that. From this point, you take a radius of 2,000 amot, which might be around here, and it may not reach the radius. It won't reach the radius of this one. So you'll have some empty space here. If it happens to be included in this one, then you're fine, right? But the point is you would not be able to walk here. Whereas if it's less than 4,000 amot and all filled in, then from this point and up, you can walk 2,000.
So the actual like picture or grid of the actual map of the home would include that U shape.
Yes, right. Because this it would include going from this, and this is part of the city. And if you're in the city, you can walk anywhere within the city, and you can walk 2,000 watt beyond the city in any direction
Yeah.
from the city shape. So that's why if I made this picture, I would extend these up so that the top part is not included within this. Okay, good. That's Rav Huna's limitation here. Well, mi amar Rav Huna, we're going to question that. Did he really say that? Mi amar Rav Huna hachi, v'amar Rav Huna chomat ha'ir shenifresa b'me'a ve'arba'im ve'achat u'shlish. We're going to compare it now to another case that has some similarity. If you have a city that once was one city with a wall all around and everything filled in, and I don't know, a hurricane or something came through and wiped out a section in the middle, right in the middle of the city. So Rav Huna says, if this space is 141 and a third or less, then we consider it all filled in. But if it's more, then we cannot fill it in. So in other words, if you have, would you count the 2,000 watt from this space all around and this space all around because it's all filled in, or not? So according to this, the measurement is 141. This is similar to the rainbow case because, imagine if this is the top of the rainbow here and the rest of it somehow goes around here. So here it's only 141. And in the first statement, he said this could be 2,000. You can have a space to 2,000 and still fill it, 4,000 and still fill it in. So which is it, Rav Huna? The cases are different. In this case, it's all open, it's not connected at all. In this case, it's only open from one side, but it's closed on this side. So the city is connected on the other side. So therefore, that's gives you more leeway than if it's completely split. Okay, what is he teaching in the second teaching when he says 144? What's his point? His point is that you make a karpef. A karpef is an area that you might use for storage or something. And so you're allowed to add a karpef of 70 to a city. And so if you're adding the 70 to this, from here to here, and this city, half city, also gets a karpef. So in other words, these are considered extensions of the city itself, and we allow both halves to have an extension. And I suppose that's his point. But wait, Rav Huna already said that regarding a Mishnah. So why do you have to say it again here, in this case of a breached city, when he already said it in the following Mishnah, which was, here's another picture, which was actually the following Mishnah is about two cities. So we're going to compare these two and wonder why he needs both. We'll prove that he does need both. The Mishnah says, Notin kan pefla Rabbi Meir says you always allow a boundary of 70 around the city, and then you measure from there, after that, another 2,000 amot. Hachamim, however, say only between two cities that are next to each other, then you say you can put a karpef. But you don't go a karpef around the whole city. Okay? Now, v'itma Rav Huna amar, karpef lazo v'karpef lazo. He's explaining Chachamim and says, between two cities, you allow a space for a storage area of 70. Rav Huna says you to have it twice. One city gets a karpef and the other city gets a karpef. Each one gets 70 for a total of 140. 141. And karpef lazo. Bechia barav amar en notnin ela karpef echad lishnehem. Bechia says only one for both. So only 70 would be the whole thing. So here's the point, right? Rav Huna regarding this Mishnah says if you have two cities adjacent, then you can fill in 141 in between them. So we already said that. So why do you have to say it again regarding the breached city? With this case, that you have 141 between. It's the same as two cities. Here's one. Sorry. Here's another, and you have right. So it's just the same thing. Why do you have to say it about this one? So the Gemara says, well, there's a slight difference. You might have thought that would be a difference. So he has to teach us that there is no difference. In the city that was breached, originally it was all one city. So therefore, it was all permitted at once upon a time as a kind of chazakah. And now that it's breached, maybe we're going to be lenient and say, okay, you're allowed two karpef areas. But if it's a closed city that was never permitted, then maybe he would not say that. He would not apply that leniency, and he would say we only have one karpef. So that's why he has to teach that regarding the Mishnah. And if I had only the Mishnah, regarding a city, two cities, he would say, two cities, each one needs their own storage area. They have a lot of things, a lot of usage, so therefore they need two. But in the case of a breach city, it's only one city, and so they don't need that much space. They only need one. And so we should not, you might think that we would only provide two karpes for two separate cities because they need the area, or to be too cramped otherwise. And in the case of the breached one, he would say, no, only 70 because it's all one city. That's why he had to teach it regarding this. Okay, good. So we clarified Rav Huna. And that makes a difference. You only count the 2,000 from each end in a rainbow, but not if it's completely breached. What about the other way now? This is here. How about from here to here, right? What is the maximum distance to do filling in? Does it matter how much this distance is? The answer is yes. That also has to be within 2,000 amot. Then you can fill in the whole thing and then go beyond that from the straight line another 2,000 amot. Even more, you can keep going, even if it's like a U shape, a long U. That's okay, and you can fill it in even more. Good. The second opinion, he says, makes sense that you can fill it in no matter how big it is. Because if he wanted, he could go by the way of the houses and going to walk to the end of the city and then walk from there. In other words, why are you limiting this person? What are you saying? This is too long? Fine, I'm allowed to walk around here, right? And so from here, then I could walk 2,000 amot. So it shouldn't make any difference how big this is, as long as this is less than 4,000 amot. Then it should be totally fine. Okay, so that seems like that makes sense. All right, good.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
With that, using that logic, then why would the 4,000 make a difference at that point? If we're saying a person could walk there either way, then shouldn't it just be allowed at that point?
Well, he can walk here, but if this was more than 4,000, then he would not be able to walk in the middle. No one would be able to walk in the middle here. Right? Let's say this spot was more than 2,000 from any point in the city. So then how could you fill it in? It's right. It's no one could actually walk there. You would not be able to apply the logic that we just said.
Okay.
Right. I mean, you can imagine someone saying, "Oh, you know what? You fill in because it's mostly closed. You fill in no matter how big." And maybe that's the pshat of the Tosefta, that even if it's miles long, but because it's enclosed space, you fill it in. So that's why Rav Huna says no. Someone has to be able to walk there in order to be able to fill it in.
Do we extend this to a donut?
You mean if it's completely round, right? That's a good question. I don't know. That's a good question. I'm trying to imagine a city like that.
Also, a question on Rav Huna. Why? I mean, is the statement we have his full statement, or is there something missing there? I'm trying to understand, like, what the significance of the wall is. Like, if it was one city without a wall, and then a hurricane came through, or a tornado, or whatever, and now you have a breach, do we now consider it two cities because there was no wall?
No, it's one city with a space. Like the rainbow is one city with a space.
No, yeah, but his statement specifically includes the words, Homat, the Homat Eir.
Right.
So
Why do you have to say that way? And besides, well, that's exactly what the Gemara asked. Why do you have to give that example? Why not treat it like two cities?
I'm wondering if the wall is significant in the case, as
The
opposed
wall
to,
that's the broken wall.
yeah, as opposed to one city that had no
Oh.
walls and now there's a breach.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if we have any parallel to that we could compare it to.
Okay.
Okay. Now, Hayusham Shene Gedudiot. I think that's what we're up to. Yep. Gebohot Asarat Tefachim. If you had these, remnants of a wall, you have some kind of dilapidated structure. So on the outskirts of the city, you still measure from them. So what is this? What are these structures? My Gedudiyot. Gedud, it sounds like it comes from an army group, right? An army troop. Maybe this was like a watchtower or a barracks. Amar Rav Yehuda, shalosh mechisot she'en alehen tikra. This is three walls and no roof. Okay, that's what it's talking about, right? Maybe it would be some kind of enclosure to protect the soldiers as they're, firing their spears somewhere else. Okay, and some kind of an embankment. Okay, fine. So that is enough. If you have three walls, even with no roof, that is considered a structure that's enough to extend the city, and then you'd have 2,000 amot beyond that. That's enough of a protection that someone could rest there. What if there's only two walls, but there is a ceiling, a roof on it? How about then? Okay, this is good for building sukkahs, right? Right, similar. Mahu tashema elu shemit'aberin ima nefesh sheyesh ba arba amot al arba amot. Okay, we're going to prove from a braita or tosefta. This is a long tosefta. It's going to bring lots of new cases. We only need one of them for our actual to prove. So we're looking out for something with two walls and a roof. But in the meantime, let's see these other things. Nefesh, meaning something over a dead body, a monument that has 4 amot by 4 amot. So kind of a big monument over a grave. Big for a grave. Or a cemetery or a bridge that has a bet dira, has somewhere to live. So here's a bridge that has a structure where people could stay on the bridge. Maybe there'll be a watchman there or a toll collector. And tombs sometimes had, here we have a, here, like this, right? So there might be, well, this is what might be the nefesh, but you might have a little structure for a guard tower in a cemetery. So someone is staying there. So that is considered enough to extend the city, and you go 2,000 amot beyond that. And then next case is Bet Knesset Sheshba Bet Dira Lachazan, a synagogue where there's a bedroom for when they say chazan, they think they mean what we would call the gabay, to sleep in. Or bet avodah zara sheyesh ba bet dira lakumarim. Or if there's an idolatrous place there that has a house for the priest, a parsonage. Even though you're not allowed to go there, but it still is a house where someone lives. So it is considered still, an existing structure, and we can use it to extend the city. That's interesting. We're giving it, some chashivut in this way. והאוravot והאוסרות שבשדות ויש בהן בית דירה והבורגנים שבתוכה והבית שבים הרי אלו מתעברין עימה. And so also a stable, storehouse in the field. If there is a residence, and a guard lives there, and house, okay, and if you have a little house on an island in the middle of the sea, that also will extend the Tehum even out to the sea. So I mean, so you can even walk. You can't swim or get on a boat or anything, but if if you could walk there, or if you were already on the boat and something like that, then that is also within the Tehum. And these are the cases, the opposite, that you cannot include in the Eruv. These are not considered dwellings. If you have a tomb, a monument on a tomb that is open on two sides, that's our case, because that means it has two sides and it has a roof, but it's open on two sides and it says not good. Okay, not good for a sukkah either. So this is relevant, or a bridge or a cemetery that does not have a place to live, or a bet knesset she'en la betira, does not have a place to live. Bet avodah zara she'en ba betira la komarim, or idolatrous house that does not have a parsonage. Uravot v'asadot shebasodot she'en behen betira, or the store, the stable and storehouse, there is no one that can live there. Ubor v'siach u'ma'ara v'gaded v'shovach shebetocha. Also, a cistern, ditch, a cave, even though someone might live in the cave, they can sleep there, but it's not a usual residence. So therefore, we do not consider that enough. Or a wall or a dovecote. I mean, chickens can live there, but not people. A boathouse, no good. It's not a permanent structure. It keeps moving around. What are you going to do? You're going to change the dimensions of the city every time the boat moves around? So all that is not good. That's the end of the Tosefta. Let's go back to the one thing that we needed from it. A monument that has two sides open. My love, couldn't we assume that it has a roof and yet it says it's no good? There you go. Now we have a proof that it's no good. Well, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't have a roof either. And that's why it's no good. But if it had a roof, it would be good. Okay, so we brought this whole long Tosefta, but there's no absolute proof from it anyway. All right, now that you mentioned the Tosefta, what is this house on the island? Who would live on a little house on an island? I mean, what use is that? Oh, it's used that when the boats come in, they could stop there and they could store the utensils that the boat needs in that little house. And I suppose it would be enough for someone to hang out there and stay there as well. And that is sufficient. Hold on, a cave? How come you don't count a cave? Some people live in caves. Rabbi Chia says in the Baraita that caves do count as a dwelling. Oh no, so that's no contradiction. That you only use a cave when there's a house on top of it, some kind of structure that's an opening to the cave, then it's okay, but not otherwise. Hold on, if there's a structure on top of it, then the structure itself is going to be good enough. So who needs the cave? Answer is, let's say a very small structure, less than 4x4, just an opening. In that case, you would be allowed to get the structure and the cave and include them both to be a residence if by themselves they were not sufficiently large. Now we're going to talk about different temporary dwellings. So people that live in huts, I guess like a Bedouin, we do not, they only have from their hut 2,000 amot. It's not considered a city, right? A cluster of tents, camping, it's not considered a city. It's a temporary dwelling. And so they only have their own personal 2,000 amot from their own tent. I'm going to ask a question now from Bnei Israel's encampment in the desert, right? That was also camping out in temporary dwellings, and they kept moving, and yet he's going to prove that they did have a techum from the outskirts of the encampment of Bnei Israel. That was all considered like a city. Here's his proof. It's from going to the bathroom. Amar bar Chana, nedidi chazi le'adehu atra, v'haveh tilata parseh al tilata parseh. So he says when they went to this place, and near the Jordan. And they encamped there. He says, I saw that. I went there and I visited and I saw the place, and it's 12 meal by 3. So this is very big. 2,000 amot is 1 meal. So this is 12 times the amount that you would be able to walk in terms of the Tehum. When Bnei Israel, when they would camp there, when they would have to relieve themselves, they wouldn't do it in the front or on the sides. It's not nice because they have the Aron there, they have the clouds there leading them. Rather, they would travel all the way to the back of the encampment and go to the bathroom there. So what's the point? That this is much longer. If you're in the front and you have to walk all the way to the back, you have to walk 12 meals, right? That's much bigger than 2,000 amot from your tent. So that means we're considering all one city, and so you can walk anywhere in the city and then walk beyond the city, and then you relieve yourself there. So this shows that if this tent dwelling was considered a city, and that goes against what we just said, that tents do not constitute a city. That one is different because they journeyed, they decided to go and stay based on God's word. So when God said you're here, then they are there permanently. When they leave, okay, then only then that they leave. So that's an exceptional case, that those tents are considered a real encampment, a permanent settlement, but not otherwise. All right, so that solves that question. What's the minimum definition of a city if there's 3 courtyards and 2 houses within each courtyard for a total of 6? As long as you have those more permanent structures, then the rest can be added, huts and other things that you can or would be part of it. But that's the main minimum amount that you need. Okay, now that you mentioned people that are nomadic tribes, we said denigrate them. Rabbis don't like them. So those who dwell in huts and wander in the desert, their lives are not a life, and their children, their wives and their children are not their own. Okay, they seem to have harbor a lot of immorality there. Let's see why. Tanya Namihachi Eliezer Ish Bidia Omer. I like how Eliezer, who's from the city of Bidia, is mentioning his city, right? Make sure he's not a nomad. Yoshve Sirifin Yoshve Kebarim. They're like this, like they dwell in graves. In other words, they never have a place that they can call home and that they can settle down in. They're always like looking for foraging, worrying about the next meal, and so it's like they're already in the grave. Regarding their daughters, if someone marries one of their daughters, it's like marrying an animal. Why? The reason is because since they have no bathhouses, the men, if they want to go bathe, they have to walk far. So all the men walk far. They leave the women behind, and then the women are maybe subject to some bad people and commit adultery, or someone rapes them, and therefore we have to assume that some of their children are not their own. That's the Ulah's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan says because it's the women when they have to go to the mikveh, they have to go far to find a mikveh, a river or somewhere, and then they are alone when they're out there, and then men can go and engage them when they go out. So because they're separated either way, either the men go away or the women go away, the women are left alone, unprotected, and so therefore we have to assume that their children are not theirs, and so we're comparing those mamzerim to behemah. Okay, that's the two opinions. Last line. My benayu. What's the difference between Ula and Rabbi Yochanan's opinions? Ika benayu naharat ismich lebeta. If let's say they had a river that was close to their house, wherever they happened to be at that time, then the woman would not have to go far from mikveh, so we don't have to worry about that. But we would still have to worry about the men who are going far for bathing. And therefore, this is a good lesson not to live in temporary dwellings. I suppose an appropriate lesson right before Sukkot that we do this for 7 days to remember how Bnei Israel were in the desert. And of course, the Bnei Israel in the desert were protected, and that was considered like a real dwelling because they had the Shekhinah with them. But this is hardly in existence to have to keep traveling around and not have a settled, a settled state, an economy, and a settled state of mind. And so we go out into our sukkahs in order to remember that and appreciate everything that we do have and all the blessings that we're able to share. Tizkul Shemina Bot and Chag Sameach.